Tonight, on this episode of Veterans Voices, we'll be exploring elder abuse among veterans. We'll be hearing from veterans and people on the front line who will tell us about how abuse occurs, what we can do to prevent it, and who's there to help. We're glad you've joined us tonight. If you're watching online, please share this broadcast with other veterans. We'll be right back with our first guests. Welcome. I'm Nathan Johnson, the Contra Costa County Veterans Service Officer, and I'm joined again by my co-host and Gold Star father, Kevin Graves.
Hey, Nathan.
Hey, Kevin.
Thank you. It's good to be here. The Veterans Voices mission is to serve the community by sharing and discussing veterans issues and connecting vets and their families to resources.
If you're watching tonight and would like to share something or ask a question, please call us at 925-313-1170. Our phone lines are open, and we encourage you to call in right now. We want to have this conversation with you. You can also send us an email at veteransvoices@contracostatv.org or connect with us on Facebook at Veterans Voices 1. Now, we'd like to welcome our first guests, Noga Welner-Kessler and Paul Derby. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for being here. Appreciate it.
So tonight we're going to talk about elder abuse, and we've got a lot to cover, but before we dive into the conversation, just real quickly introduce yourself, please.
Okay. So in the 1980s, I served in the Israeli Army Medical Corps, and I went on to get my MSW and started my social work career at the Vet Center in St. Louis, and moved on to California in 1994, and have worked in a number of different areas in social work, including hospital, clinics, and past 6 years in hospice.
Thanks, Noga. Paul, tell us about yourself, sir.
Veteran, U.S. Navy, retired, got my commission out of college, went to flight school for a while, went out to sea, did 2 tours in Vietnam, one in the brackish water, it was kind of brown and kind of blue, and then 1 year in Da Nang. And then retired from the reserve, and now I'm spending a lot of time volunteering in Hospice of the East Bay, Meals on Wheels, which is very appropriate to this subject, in the American Cancer Society.
Well, thank you for your service to our country, and thank you for continuing to serve, Paul. That's awesome.
Thank you very much.
Tell us a little bit about some of the things you run into when you're out there in the field, when you're working with Meals on Wheels.
Well, you're trained every time you go into a home to deliver a meal to keep your eyes open. Take a look around and see if there's any evidence of abuse. Is the house clean or dirty? And are the people okay? Basically, are they vertical? You want to be careful not to ask them how they're feeling, because you may never be able to get out of the house. But tell them that they look nice, they look good, and again, you keep your eyes open for any evidence of, are they in pain, are they in trouble, anything that should be communicated further up the ladder.
You're trained on this. Why do you think it's important that they train you on that?
Excuse me?
Well, why is it important, and why did they decide to train you on that?
Well, it's one of the important things. It's you know, one thing is to drive to their house and find it, and thank goodness for GPSs on cars for that. Mm-hmm. But then you're probably one of the very few people that these people see. Mm. They're alone, they're elderly, they're by themselves, they've got some kind of a medical problem, and so the training is pretty thorough to keep your eyes open and help out when you can.
What kind of things I assume, Noga, you go through the same kind of training. What kind of things do they teach you to look for?
Well, whenever I do a home visit, on hospice, most of the patients have medical issues. So what we do is we assess Do they have a caregiver that's able to provide or assist them with their day-to-day care? Are they managing their health, their medicine? Do they have a home that is safe? Are there risks? And we make sure that they have the support and the resources that are available to them so they can be safe in their home. So definitely when we come in to do an assessment, those are the things that we look for.
So for both of you, you're dealing with people that don't get out, or otherwise they wouldn't be having meals brought to them. And obviously with hospice care, you're dealing with people that are near the end of their life. And so it's critically important that a professional eye gets a view of what's going on there. I mean, it may not be, we talk about elder abuse, but it may not necessarily, it may be abuse only in the fact that the people that are taking care of them don't know how to take care of them.
So we have an aging population that many have decided to remain in their homes. Oftentimes they are cared for by an elderly spouse or adult children that perhaps are not available, or are available perhaps, but are not knowledgeable of the end-of-life care. And oftentimes we do find elderly that are living alone. So all those three factors in living later and with more health issues, there's issues that need to be addressed and looked at, for sure.
Well, we're going to cover a few things here. We have a caller, Tina actually has called into the show. We're going to take her call in just a second. We're also going to go over a vignette in which we have a real scenario that we're going to have read off. And I'd like to get your perspective on how long have you been doing this, Noga, this kind of work?
6 years in hospice.
6 years, okay. And how often do you encounter these types of situations where you think that you have been able to identify someone who's been neglected or abused? Is this something that happens pretty regularly or irregularly?
The issue with caregiving is something that is not uncommon, where there is a lot of stress. There might be caregiver burnout.
Yeah.
There might not be the resources and the support that is needed.
Yeah.
So oftentimes with teaching, with making sure that the resources are found and are provided, then the caregiving does improve, and then there's a quality of life, and all that. So
great. I want to interrupt you because we're going to take Tina from Portland, Oregon.
Wow.
Thank you, Tina, for joining the show. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great, thank you. And I understand that there's something, some kind of new law in Portland. Can you tell us a little bit about that, or maybe you have a question for us?
Yes, no, I've done a lot of policy here in Oregon as a veteran. And we've done a couple bills, actually. One of the bills was a volunteer veteran coordinator position. And it's with the Department of Veterans Affairs in our state through Oregon. And basically what this person does is go throughout the state and collect volunteers. And in each area, and if a veteran is in need of that in that area, like Meals on Wheels and whatever they need, they call up those veteran volunteers to go over and help that veteran.
Wow.
And it's very proven. We're very rigorous out here on veteran policy. I've been doing it now for 10 years, and we literally just passed the biggest veteran lottery bill here, which actually takes proceeds from our lottery dollars.
Oh, wow.
And like this year, it roughly went, I estimate, around $38 million put on the ground for veterans.
That's great. Well, Tina, thank you so much for calling and sharing with us. It sounds like maybe the state of Oregon is a model for us to all follow. I want to go over this vignette real quickly because we have only so much time in this segment. So if we could play our first vignette, we'd like to hear that now.
I am a Korean War Navy veteran and 87 years old. I currently live alone with my dog in my trailer home. I have always received my medical care through the VA, but currently have been feeling weaker and more confused and have problems breathing. It is hard for me to get to the VA. I was told I have cancer and also that I have been exposed to asbestos, and that is why I have a hard time breathing and need to use oxygen all the time. The VA social worker suggested that I get a bed at the VA, but I refuse. I've been living here most of my adult life, and my dog is my best friend. I like being on my own and doing as I please. I've always been on my own since I was 17 and have managed. My son lives an hour away and also has cancer and is waiting for surgery to remove a tumor. He tries to come and help me the best he can, but he also has to work and his health is bad. I worry a lot about him and don't want to be an additional burden for him. Recently hurt my ribs after falling down, but did not let my son know so that he would not worry about me. I don't have much of an appetite and don't cook much anymore. Recently, I left the stove on, but my neighbor, who looks in on me every so often, smelled the gas and came to tell me that my gas stove was on. I mostly sit in my chair with my dog. I get tired very easily and need to use the oxygen more now. I feel out of breath when walking around the house and need to rest after every task. I take lots of pills. Sometimes I cannot remember what I took and when I took it, and I forget to write things down. My hearing is bad, so I cannot hear the TV very well or the telephone ringing. I leave the door open so my son and the nurses can come in when they need to. A lady from the county came over to see how I was doing, and she said that she has talked with the social worker who comes with the nurse to see how I can get more support and assistance at home. They also talked with me about getting a bed at the VA so that they can take better care of me, since I'm having a hard time taking care of myself and there's no one at home who can help me. My son asked me if I want to go stay at the VA, and I said no, I want to stay at home, and he said okay, and told the social worker that I refuse.
Well, Paul, thoughts on that? I would imagine maybe you've seen some scenarios similar to that in your work with Meals on Wheels.
Not really. Thank goodness I've seen very little evidence of elder abuse. But I have seen a lot of people that are near that same situation. They need help. They don't know where to go to get it.
Or whether to accept it or not.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
What about you, Noga?
Yeah, this is not an uncommon scenario. What my thoughts were, there's a lot of red flags here. So what can we do to support him as long as possible in the home? So a lot of things come to mind. In addition to Meals on Wheels, Life Alert button, getting maybe the VA to have a home health aide come, all different things that possibly could help support him as long as possible in the home, because that is what he hopes for. But definitely there are quite a number of red flags and concerns.
And later on in the show, we're going to have a segment on resources where we'll talk about some of those things that may be available through the county. The county has several programs that I think could be beneficial to somebody such as we just heard about.
What do you think is behind this scenario in which someone maybe recognizes that they need some help but is unwilling to accept the help? What are they struggling with? We just have a few minutes, but I'm curious what your take is on that.
Well, sometimes they're unfamiliar with facilities and have perhaps memories of facilities that perhaps their family members have stayed at, that as a child perhaps they were frightened to see the facilities. And if maybe they go to the facilities like the VA in Martinez, the facility is quite nice to go and visit there and see that things have perhaps changed. Maybe it's the fear of the unknown.
I agree.
And
I also think a big part of it is independence. They're afraid they're going to lose their independence. They're not going to be in control of their own life.
yes.
Always been independent.
Right.
Right.
And you can't accept that he needs
And maybe
help.
feeling a little sad, too, to know that life has kind of entered into this stage in which they can't do the things that they were able to do. They weren't able to prepare a meal or weren't able to get around and keep up the house and such. So
Right.
I would imagine that's very tough for them to struggle with, the fear and the sadness and such, yeah. I want to thank both of you.
Absolutely.
For the work that you do, because I know in hospice and in delivering meals that primarily your job is to care for these people, but I appreciate that you are the eyes that are out on the street looking for our elderly population, looking out for our elderly population. And I know that when you see someone who needs help, you're always making that phone call. So thank you both for being on the show tonight.
Thanks for the kind words.
And Noga, you'll join us later because we have a special segment at the end of the show. So.
Thank you.
I want to thank Tina from Portland, Oregon. Tina, thank you so much for calling in, and I'd love to hear what Portland, Oregon was doing to set the tone and set the stage for how we should care for our elderly veterans. So if you're joining us, please tune in, or if you have tuned in, please call in with your comments and questions just like Tina did. Thank you again for staying with us. And if you're out there with your own experiences related to this topic, we encourage you to call in, be a part of the conversation. We'd love to hear from you. You can call in right now, just like Tina did, 925-313-1170. Next up, Ryan Berg had a chance to connect with veterans about how they feel when people tell them, thank you for your service. He was at the Martinez VA Clinic in our Vet on the Street segment. Enjoy.
When someone says to you, thank you for your service, how do you feel, or what's your initial reaction? If it's a stranger? Or...
Most people don't realize what they're doing. You know, they just hear on the news, you see a vet, you tell them thank you. They don't realize why they're saying it. They just know, you tell them vet thank you. So, but I do enjoy it. And I would go off and be happy to do it again. So if I wasn't in this kind of shape, I'd be over in Afghanistan right now.
How do you feel when people say thank you for your service?
Well, if it's around here, I say thank you for yours. You know, but people don't say that too much where I am, you know.
But when they do, or if a complete stranger sees you and they're like, oh, thanks for your service, how do you feel?
It's almost like saying hello, you know, because, you know, you're kind of accustomed to hearing it. And
does it mean anything to you?
Of course, you know, I mean, you know, how deep it means something is another thing, because we know we're all pretty shallow.
You know, when I came out, they weren't saying thank you for the service. They were shunning you. They were calling you names. They were just kind of like you know, don't want to even be bothered with you. So when I witnessed people saying thank you for your service, and that thing started, to be honest with you, I felt relieved. I felt good about that. And I've had people stop me in some strange circumstances and ask me if I was in the Air Force or if I was in the service, and they say thank you for service, and they mean it from their heart, and I appreciate that. I really began to appreciate it because my brother never got that. You know? Yeah.
When people say thank you for your service, or if they do, how do you feel about that? What's your first reaction?
I like it.
Yeah.
I say it too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Over here especially,
Mm-hmm.
because almost everybody over here, you know, they aren't drafted. Like in my day, you were drafted, you didn't really have a choice. So you could draft or enlist. And I went to 2 years of junior college and then enlisted, which was a procedure that was not offensive.
It only has meaning to me when I'm with other soldiers. It doesn't have meaning to me if somebody says off the streets, thank you for your service. It has a little bit of meaning, but you don't know what we've been through. So it's not really thank you for your services. It's more like I have to do this for my country, you know. So when people get that mentality, maybe we'll have a better country and a better army, because things don't look too good right now. Like me and you served in real wars, and we survived. You feel me? Some of us didn't survive mentally, but we still here. You know what I mean?
When someone says thank you for your service, how do you feel? What's your first reaction?
I didn't really do too much in that aspect, you know. I understand that they're trying to be nice with me and thank me for actually being out there on the field. But I wasn't really on the field, even though I'm kind of supporting the field. If I wasn't there, maybe they might have had problems. So when they say thank you for your service, I've learned to accept it. It's like somebody celebrating me or saying thank you for a nice job.
Thank you for sharing that.
Welcome back to Veterans Voices. We're now joined by Jill Henderson of the Contra Costa County DA's office, whose work is focused on elder abuse cases. Welcome, Jill.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and your history with the DA's office.
Sure. I've been a criminal prosecutor for almost 22 years, and presently I am the unit supervisor for elder abuse.
Fantastic.
What does that mean? I don't think until we had this show that I realized the district attorney's office got involved in elder abuse. I had thought of, adult protective services. So what does your job do on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. So obviously there's the civil arena and there's the criminal arena. And unfortunately, sometimes elder abuse gets into the criminal arena. So once the law enforcement agency takes the report of a crime, if they solve that case, they send the police reports to me for review to see if criminal charges are warranted. Fortunately, we can't file in every case we see, but often you will review all of the physical and financial, felony, and misdemeanor cases and see when charges are warranted.
Do you do any investigations out of your office, or is it most of that done by the police?
For my unit, most of those investigations are done by the police. We do have a special operations division, and they, what comes to mind is real estate fraud, and that division is funded with investigators to investigate some other types of fraud.
I got you.
Can you give us kind of an idea of where abuse enters into the legal realm? What maybe a common scenario is in which maybe a person didn't realize that they could face criminal charges?
Sure. So there's, I would say out of the thousands and thousands of elder abuse reports that I've read over the years, they fall into very predictable patterns. I would say that the cases that I'm seeing are about 50-50 physical and financial. Sadly, these are just the reported ones. I'm sure it's more rampant than we're aware of because it happens in the home, and if the caretaker is the abuser and has exclusive access to the victim, nobody knows about it. So I review those cases, and I say it's about 50-50 physical and financial. With most of the physical abuse, it's a loved one. We see a lot of mental health issues of why a son or a daughter would abuse a mother or a grandmother. And on the financial side, unfortunately, it's also people in a position of trust that have access to the seniors' financial information and abuse that position of trust and actually steal from the person who they're charged with caring for.
Well, we have another vignette that we want to watch right now, and so if we could, we will hear our second piece.
I have a friend who's an older veteran. He built a successful business and then sold it when he retired. His wife passed away a few years ago, and he's had relationships with some other women. About 3 years ago, he met a woman online from Eastern Europe. She moved here, they were married, and seemed happy for a while. It seems that things have now changed. His only son is deeply concerned. He has been unable to speak to his father in 2 years. The wife always says that he is out when he calls on the phone, and they don't answer the door when he tries to visit. The son says that the neighbors tell him that the woman's 2 brothers have moved in with them. They also say that his dad's health seems to be deteriorating. The dad used to send generous gifts to his grandchildren, but has had no contact with them for a long time. The son also shared a modest savings account with the dad, but the bank recently told him the account had been closed. The son is very upset about this situation. Is there anything he can do?
Okay, so thoughts on that, Jill? That's an example, of course, of maybe some financial abuse that's occurring, or is that abuse? Is that a scenario in which the district attorney's office would get involved?
Sure, I would certainly need more information, but that certainly raises a lot of red flags. On the physical elder abuse is a little more straightforward because you can't really consent to being physically abused. On the financial component, what we look at is capacity. So if somebody has capacity and they have money, no matter how unwise their decisions are, it is not criminal to spend your money how you would like. there might be some civil issues going on, but in terms of the criminal arena, there's not a lot that we can do about what we call those sweetheart scams. What I did notice about that piece was the common elements of isolation, and that's how the abusers get the control and are able to continue on with their abuse by isolating them from friends and family and other people who might be able to detect the abuse and report it.
How else can someone protect themselves from this type of scenario? I hear this a lot from the adult children who come to us in our office and say, I don't know who this person is that my mom or dad fell in love with, but I don't like that they have control and have their name on the bank accounts. What could that adult child have done to maybe be a little bit more proactive in the beginning?
Sure, and obviously we want prevention is the key, right? I would much rather save somebody from being a victim before the crime happens. I would, the next segment is going to talk a lot about the resources that are available to people, but when it does happen, and it does happen, I would say notify the police as soon as possible. A lot of people feel guilty, especially our seniors may be under the misimpression that the police will only respond if you're bleeding or if your house is on fire. They investigate all crime, and the earlier you report it, the better. If there is no crime, it's okay. The police will let you know, and the police are excellent resources that they can provide to help. Then the second main point is you really, really need to be checking your financial documents frequently. If you discover your fraud in the first 30 days, most of the time the banks will absorb that loss and credit you back the full amount of loss. So it's really important to be vigilant and check those financial resources before they're gone.
Are there ways of, talking about the adult children and talking about those of us that are looking to take care of our parents as they get older, are there things you can do, tools you can use, trusts or things you can set up that would keep that money from being taken away from the family at the time when the parents agree? Are there things like that? Are there tools we could use to set up that type of a scenario?
Yes, I'm a criminal lawyer. That's definitely a civil tool.
Right.
And I would refer people to the Family Justice Center, or there's one in Richmond and there's one in Concord that's going to be covered on the next segment of resources. And definitely prepare for these issues before the elderly person loses capacity, so that you can kind of have a meeting of the mind with the siblings.
I think it's important to encourage that to our audience. My parents are 91 years old. I'm blessed every day that they're with us, but you have to have that conversation. It's a difficult conversation to have. How do you go to people that have raised you, people you've loved your whole life, and say, hey, we need to talk about you dying?
Yes.
But it's an absolute necessary conversation that has to occur while the capacities are there to understand and logically. Otherwise, there's just so many scams out there that can take advantage of the elderly.
Absolutely.
It's not unique to our veteran community, even though that's what we're here talking about.
Let's go back to the topic of abuse just in general. When something does reach into the legal realm, I guess I'm somewhat familiar with, say, how abuse would affect a child and maybe how the law would become involved in a child situation. They may remove the child from the home. What can be done in the instance in which abuse occurs for an elderly person and it does reach the legal jurisdiction? Can an older age person be removed from a home and put into a safer location? Can charges actually be filed, and could the person who is the abuser actually end up going to jail? How does the law actually intervene in these instances?
Sure, and how the law intervenes depends on the circumstances of any particular case. If we have a child who is a drug abuser and stabs a victim and tries to kill them, that's obviously a very severe violent felony, and that person is likely to go to jail, at least initially, while we sort things out. And I don't mean to deter anybody from reporting a crime initially, thinking their loved one will go to jail forever, or worse yet, prison. Once the case is adjudicated, we actually have a lot of sentencing options tailored to each specific case. If it's a drug issue, that's the cause the crime, we can, as a condition of the sentence, order drug treatment and give probation. If it's a mental health issue, sometimes it's better off for everybody, especially the defendant, to start getting some help for that, and get on medication or whatever type of services they need, so that this problem doesn't repeat itself, maybe with worse consequences the next time. So unfortunately, it's not a very happy intervention when your loved one gets arrested for physical abuse. And I typically tell victims, it feels like it gets worse, but it ends up getting better in the end. And then for the most violent cases, we can get criminal protective orders when it's time, when we need to just completely sever things and protect them by having the abuser go away and stay away when the parents just can't handle it anymore. Maybe sometimes the children are 50 and they've never lived outside the home and the parents can't do it anymore. We can help them get that child out and stay out.
Yeah, I think why I was asking that question was not to deter people from reporting that, but to hopefully understand that there could be some consequences. And maybe a person would make a choice to reach out to resources and ask for help rather than to continue this pattern that's happening. We have just about a minute left. Did you have a question? I wanted to know the difference between neglect and abuse and how that applies to the law, but go ahead.
No, that's fine.
So when it comes to the law, do they define a difference between neglect and abuse, or is it considered the same?
Neglect is a form of abuse.
Okay.
And one more comment on that reporting concept. If they have stolen from you, this person, if you just fire your caretaker, what do you think is going to happen next? They're going to get another job and then steal from the next person.
That's a great point.
So,
and the same with the mental health issue. You're actually doing them, you could be actually doing them a favor by getting them help that they didn't even know they needed. Jill, I want to thank you so much for being with us tonight. That segment went flying by, but that was a tremendous amount of information you gave us. Thank you for sharing that with our audience. Please stay with us. We'll be right back with 3 more guests to talk about resources and other support for at-risk elders in our community. Welcome back to Veterans Voices. We are now joined by Glenn Bevins, Nicole Howell, and Tracy Murray. Thank you all 3 for being here. We appreciate it.
So we're going to continue the conversation about elder abuse, and we're going to focus on resources. But before we start talking about the help that's available for these caretakers, just real quickly introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, so my name is Nicole Howell. I run the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program in Contra, Costa, and Solano.
Thank you.
Glenn Bivens. I'm the elder abuse advocate for Contra Costa County, serving all parts of the county.
Tracy Murray, I'm the Deputy Director for Contra Costa County's Aging and Adult Services Department.
Well, we have a bunch of experts here, and that's awesome. Tell us about the Ombudsman Program.
Yeah, so our role is to protect the rights of residents who live in long-term care, be that skilled nursing facilities, assisted living, or what is called in California, boarding care. And so we address issues related to quality of care and quality of life. And unfortunately, sometimes that does mean that we intersect with elder abuse and neglect. And so our role is to resolve issues and put the resident back in the driver's seat and help to ensure that doesn't happen again.
So you more support, or your mission is to support the elder or the person that's at the facility, or whether it be one of those 3 different facilities.
Yeah, the individual, and I would also say their family member or their caretaker as well, to help guide them as to the rights and the process and how they can best be advocating for that individual.
Very nice.
Well, the important part of this segment, I'm glad that we just got a good sense and understanding of how the Ombudsman is involved, but we want to help people understand that help is out there for them and encourage them to reach out for some help. We have a scenario that we're going to listen to real quickly, and maybe that'll help us get started with this conversation. So we'll roll our last scenario for the evening.
My grandmother, who is 96 years old, has dementia and is currently bedbound due to recent strokes. She was sent home from the hospital on hospice in the care of my uncle. My uncle, an Army vet who has no family of his own, has been caring for grandmother for years now. My uncle does the best he can, but he has his own health issues. He is service-connected for both physical health issues and a diagnosis of PTSD, and that is his only source of income. My grandmother receives a small pension from my grandfather's company, but there's no other income. My grandmother's home is very cluttered. There are piles of papers and things in rooms up to the ceiling, and access is very limited. One room remains uncluttered and easily accessible from the door, and that is my grandmother's bedroom. There is space there to move around, but the room is very dirty. They have a dog they keep in the room and do not take him out for walks, so the room smells of urine and feces. My uncle does not want to get rid of the dog because he's my grandmother's comfort dog. My uncle has had a difficult time with my grandmother's decline and insists that she eat, even though it is difficult for her to swallow. My uncle gets mad at her when she does not eat or does not help him to get her up to use the commode or to clean her. He has a difficult time cleaning her when she soils herself. He often leaves her without clothes on with only a blanket, as it is easier for him to clean her that way. Recently, an adult protective services worker visited my uncle and grandmother at their home and is assisting my uncle in getting someone to help clean the home. The APS worker is also coordinating with the hospice social worker in looking into additional support and day-to-day assistance for my uncle in caring for my grandmother. Over time, my uncle has begun to accept the support of the hospice nurses and social workers in teaching and assisting him in caring for grandmother, reducing her risk of aspirating or falling, and keeping her and the environment clean.
Glenn, tell us a little bit about your job, and in that scenario that we just heard about, it wasn't really a matter of somebody willingly and knowingly abusing somebody, but just the fact that they didn't have the training, the knowledge, or even the ability to properly care for them. How would your job come into play in that? Would you have a role in that?
Well, as a crime victim advocate, as this is could actually be a crime, but a way to find other, I'm actually linked to other resources inside the county. There are some nonprofits and some are government agencies, and I reach out to them with the client's permission, of course, to link them to the right services to get them what they need.
And Tracy, how about you?
That is a very real scenario that we see every day, and I think that part of the role of the county, and specifically of Adult Protective Services, is to provide referrals to services. And we would think that in addition to the scenario that was described, that we would refer out to Meals on Wheels, maybe to friendly visiting, some caregiver respite. So we would want to connect the uncle with his community, and so that the recipient of his services could have the rest of their life living at home.
And that he would benefit from some training and understanding, because he's probably frustrated himself in that he can't provide the care that he needs, or he's got his own issues. We all have our own issues.
Well, and I think about all the time and attention and focus that's spent on caring for a little baby. I remember having 2 little girls myself that were infants, and a lot of time and focus is spent on how to properly feed them and care for them. We don't really get that same kind of training when it's our turn to care for the elderly. So is there some opportunity for someone to come in the home and help them? I hear in this scenario, this person struggled to clean them. Is there someone who can help them understand how to properly clean a person to keep them healthy? Is there someone who can help them understand how to declutter their life and make sure that the home environment is safe, that there's no stoves left on, or that there's no risk fall or something of that sorts? And if so, who?
So I would say yes and yes, there is help. And there are a number of nonprofit agencies and community organizations that we work with. And I think it's probably easiest to just call a central number that we have in our county, which is 1-800-510-2020. We have trained social workers who would be able to make those kind of recommendations.
1-800-510-2020. Now, are these services generally free, or does someone have to pay for this?
It depends on the circumstances.
Okay.
So there are services like in-home support services. Those are for consumers that are already eligible for or receiving Medi-Cal. So people may be able to come in. There are, I think Nicole knows about a lot of these resources. They're family caregiver resources.
And I think it's important to clarify things in that the county really is the basis for a lot of these resources. That one number, even though the state controls licensing of homes and other things, we, being that I work for the state, don't do that type of thing. We rely on the county at a local level to do that. And to kind of clear up some of the confusion for our listeners, that's where you first want to go. You want to go to the county. You want to go to an ombudsman if you're having a problem with a board and care facility and you think that your loved one might not be getting the care they need. They might not be getting out of bed. They may be getting bed sores, whatever that might be, so that that can start to be dealt with.
So let me ask Glenn, in some instances, it might be possible that the victim has a difficult time communicating their needs. And so you're the victim advocate. How do you best connect with that victim and really truly understanding, because this is a person. You know, one of my favorite songs is by John Prine, and it's a song called Hello in there, and it really helps us understand that there's still a living human being. There's still a soul inside. How do you connect with them even when they have a tough time, or if they have a tough time, communicating what they really need?
Well, first of all, I read the police report, so I get an idea of what's going on with them, get a broader view of what's going on with them, and I do in-depth interviews with them. I will call them multiple times just to get a feel for how they're doing. Just kind of bond with them a little bit so we can find what they need. In part, we actually talking about IHSS. My son actually went through IHSS to help take care of my parents as they transitioned. So it's a very good service.
Okay. So IHSS, In-Home Supportive Services, is an opportunity for someone to be a caregiver like your son and go into the home and help this person with what functions do they generally provide?
Help them get them clean, preparing meals. My parents were lucky. They actually had the county had sent them a person to come check their meds, do their blood pressures.
Okay.
They taught my son how to exercise them and everything of that nature.
Okay. So you've actually had this in your own
in my life,
personal.
yeah.
Has that helped you in any way, you think, to shape your role as a victim advocate?
I think probably if I didn't spend the time with my parents, with my son and my parents as they were transitioning, I may not be where I am right now.
So we have about 3 or 4 minutes. Where should a person start? Let's just kind of run through a scenario that I see very commonly. Mom and dad are doing great. They're living out their retired years. They're living independently. Mom or dad falls down, ends up in the hospital, needs some rehab care, and long-term care begins from that point going forward. And this caregiver, this adult son or daughter, oftentimes is at the peak of their career. Their children maybe have just moved out of the home. They're making the most money they could have ever made because they've been in their career for so many years. Where should they begin when they recognize that they may need some help?
So I think the best place to start would, first of all, again, be calling the line that Tracy mentioned, because that informative assistance is a no wrong door policy. You can talk to a social worker, you can explain the situation, they can either give you other resources or they may be able to help resolve the problem right there. I also would say I think what's key is that if we call before there's a problem, call when mom and dad are doing great. Have a conversation as a family. Bring the trusted neighbor in. Talk about what you want and what you need. I also have gone through with my grandmother as well. Talk about what your desires are. I think we're so scared that if we talk about aging and potentially passing, that it will somehow make it happen. And the truth is it's not like that. We talk about having children in daycare and support services long before we need them. Let's do the same with aging.
I think that's a great point.
And there's also veteran-specific resources that I'm sure they can get through that line that we're familiar with, where these nonprofits, especially as we talked about, have special funding that comes in from the federal government that's specific for veterans and for home health care that they can get if they get connected with the right nonprofit.
And this is perfect. Yeah, we actually have a question from an anonymous viewer. Thank you for this question. It sounds like the best source of help for an older veteran is the county. Does the VA offer any special help? You know, Tracy and I were actually colleagues formerly. And Tracy worked for the Alameda County Veteran Service Office, and me being the Contra Costa County. I think the county is the best place, as the County Veteran Service Office can help the veteran understand and the family understand which benefits are available. So the disability pension program, which is often called on the street aid in attendance, is a monetary benefit in which if a wartime veteran or the surviving spouse of a wartime veteran has limited income and limited assets, they may qualify for this tax-free monetary benefit, and that monetary benefit may be useful to help them purchase care in the community. Let's talk a little bit about that. If they tap into a resource, a financial resource, is there help in finding a care facility that might be suitable for the needs of that care, of the person who needs care?
I think Nicole is very well resourced
We
to
have just
answer
a
that
minute.
question.
Go ahead.
So it's important to me, as ombudsman, we can't recommend facilities. What we
Okay.
can do is help guide family members. We can
Okay.
help guide them to, they can look at licensing websites, how they should read those reports, what they should be looking for, and of course, we'll always point them back to the individual. Who is that older adult and where would they best fit? How can the family still be engaged? And that long-term care doesn't necessarily mean forever. It could be short-term, it could be long-term, it's for sort of a season, or maybe forever, but either way, their rights can be respected. It doesn't have to be that scary story we thought of earlier with the Veterans Home. It really can be beneficial.
And I think it's important here that you give out that phone number one more time as we're running out of time, because that is going to be a key for getting the resources you need. So can you share that with us again, Tracy?
Of course. It's 1-800-510-2020.
Very good. So reach out to that phone number or reach out to the County Veteran Service Office to find out more about the VA programs that are available for you as a veteran or for your surviving spouse or for your mother and father. Tracy, Glenn, Nicole, I want to thank you not only for being on the show tonight, but for the work that you do. And you guys are probably at times that kind of angel that someone's been looking for. So it's great to know that we have lots of resources for not only a person needing help, but a person who's providing help. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Next up, we had a chance to sit down with Marine Corps veteran Bob Ellis in our A Veterans Voice segment. Take a look and enjoy.
I'm Stephen Burchick, and this segment is A Veteran's Voice. The veteran today is Bob Ellis. Bob, glad to meet you.
You too, sir.
Can you tell us a little bit about your military service, branch, deployment, any special memories?
My service experience is probably highlighted by the fact that I was assigned to be a field radio operator and shotgun, a protector for our regimental commander, Robert H. Barrow, colonel at the time. Serving with him, it was like a father-son relationship. He was also a very gung-ho Marine. When I was assigned to him in Vietnam, he was a full-bird colonel. You generally don't find full-bird colonels in the field with the troops, except for visits. That was not his way of working. We also had a 3rd Regiment commander, a Major General, Raymond Davis, that was of the same nature as Colonel Barrow. He had no problem with the colonel living with the troops, going on the assaults with the troops, conducting daily visits, spent a lot of time in Huey's, flying to the different companies out in the field. We were generally located on a fire support base in the Ashaw Valley. The valley runs between North Vietnam and South Vietnam and the Laotian border. We looked down on basically the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Very active area. The Marine Corps was, the 9th Marine Regiment was one of the most highly decorated units in the Vietnam War and in Marine Corps history for the operation in Dewey Canyon in attempting to shut down the Ho Chi Minh Trail and the supplies from the north. Being so closely associated with General Barrow was both a privilege and an honor that I'll always remember. For my service in Vietnam, I was awarded the Standard Combat Service Medals and Ribbons, along with the Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry with Bronze Star, and the Navy Achievement Award with Combat V. After Vietnam, I was sent to a small base in Norfolk, Virginia, and signed to a security guard detachment. The Commander-in-Chief Atlantic Fleet was based there along with the NATO Atlantic headquarters. It was a top secret assignment due to the intelligent work that was being done there. My duties there were Sergeant of the Guard, working every 4th day of the week, a 24-hour stint, and 1 weekend a month, a 72-hour duty. I was discharged from active service in July of 1970.
Well, that sounds like quite an interesting career, and especially with the intelligence work. So,
it was.
You were assigned to a fairly high-ranking person. I'm guessing that wasn't just a random assignment. Had you stood out in some of your training or early experience that they chose you for that position? Did you do more push-ups than the other Marines?
Undoubtedly, I was chosen for specific reasons. Physically, I had completed Marine Corps boot camp, so I was in top-notch physical condition. I was also a good Marine. I was a dedicated Marine. I appreciated the spirit, the discipline that we were subjected to on a day-to-day basis. The idea of providing support, providing for cover for our fellow Marines. The esprit de corps, the Semper Fi tradition was probably my goal. I stood out as I did my job, I did it the best of my ability, and I supported the others around me.
Understand you work with a different organization now. Can you tell us about what you're doing these days?
Yes, I do volunteer work with Hospice of the East Bay. The hospice was established in 1977, and it basically creates support for those patients who prefer to die at home. Their mission is to care for the patients through the end of their life, easing fear and suffering, while also ensuring their patients and families make sure that they retain dignity and control over their own personal choices.
How did you get started in this program?
In 2001, my dad became ill in upstate New York, and I took a leave of absence from my work to assist him. He was soon admitted to the local hospice there, and I cared for him until his death 4 months later. In becoming familiar with hospice and the purpose of hospice and the way that this local New York State hospice, Mountain Valley Hospice, conducted themselves was just such an inspiration that after 8 years, I decided it's something I've got to complete. It's something I want to do. I've completed hospice training with Hospice of the East Bay, the Sacramento Hospice Consortium, and was certified as an end-of-life specialist by Teaching Transitions.
Well, it sounds like a fair amount of training and sensitivity.
Yes.
What is Vet to Vet?
It's a program that's sponsored by Hospice of the East Bay. While many of our World War II veterans have died, many Korean veterans are now coming into hospice care. Many more Vietnam vets, our largest segment of the veteran population, are also coming into care. The Hospice of the East Bay's Veteran-to-Veteran program was established to recognize those veterans and honor them. Our veterans volunteers may sit at the bedside with veteran patients. They provide relief and support for caregivers, and they provide support for spouses and families of veterans. The veteran patient is offered the opportunity to be honored in our pinning ceremony. In this ceremony, the veteran is presented a certificate which honors his or her military service and is given an American flag and a lapel pin. These ceremonies are powerful, emotional, celebratory events that are very well received by the patient veterans, their families, and their friends. As Nathan reported in his Veterans Day ceremony speech at the Board of Supervisors chambers, our county has over 55,000 veterans that live here.
Well, it sounds like there's a large pool of people that might use your help. What are a couple of the best memories you have from your activities?
In dealing with the veterans that have served as I have, has given me great emotional feelings for the veterans, for the situation that they're in, for they are nearing their end of life, transitioning now to go on to the other worlds. In dealing with the families and seeing the responses that they give to our ceremonies, many times during the pinning ceremonies, there's tears coming from myself, from Noga, our lead social worker, the patient, him or herself, and the crowds that are around us. We've had pinning experiences or pinning ceremonies where there'll be 3 or 4 members of the family present. There may be 15 or 20 present. We recently had a pinning ceremony scheduled in Antioch last year. The veteran was very close to death. It was scheduled for like 10 o'clock a weekday morning. At 9 o'clock, we got a call that the veteran had just passed. 5 minutes later, we got a call back stating, wait a minute, the veteran's family would like to have you come in and perform the ceremony.
Oh, wow.
So we went to the house, gathered around the body, 15 or 20 family member unit there in the living room, and conducted the ceremony. Probably the most emotional event of the ceremonies that I've participated in. Again, with HIPAA regulations, I can't go much further with any types of that kind of personal information, but they're very touching times.
Well, thank you, Bob. Appreciate you being here today.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome back. We had a question from Felicia Gaffney on Facebook, and Felicia asks, what resources are available for elderly homeless veterans? Thank you for the question, Felicia. The VA contracts with transitional housing facilities. Our closest one is in Stockton that I'm aware of, and this transitional housing facility provides geriatric care for elderly homeless veterans. If you need help with that, contact the VA clinic or your county veteran service office.
Tonight, we're happy to have a shadow box on our set from local Air Force veteran Sean Pointer.
Sean served for 28 years and was activated for Desert Shield and Desert Storm.
He was deployed in support of Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Thank you for tuning in to Veterans Voices tonight. We wanted to leave you with a few events and resources.
Adult Protective Services assists older adults, people with disabilities, and families to maximize self-sufficiency, safety, health, and independence. Visit ehsd.org/elderly disabled to learn more. The Ombudsman of Contra Costa County works to empower, educate, and partner with older and dependent adults to best meet their unique needs. For more information, visit cc.ombudsman.org. Family Caregiver Alliance strives to address the needs of families by providing long-term care for loved ones at home. Visit their site at caregiver.org. Hospice of the East Bay provides emotional, spiritual, and grief support for East Bay families. They accept all medically qualified patients regardless of their insurance status or ability to pay. Visit them at www.hospiceeastbay.org to learn more about their programs.
To rewatch tonight's episode, check back on our homepage later this week, or check your cable provider's schedule for rebroadcast times. You can also rewatch this episode and many others on our YouTube channel, Veterans Voices of Contra Costa. So be sure to subscribe. Our next live broadcast will be Monday, March 18th at 7 p.m. Be sure to tune in. This is Veterans Voices of Contra Costa County, signing off, wishing you all a relaxing evening. We will leave you with a poem from one of our special guests, Noga Welner-Kessler.
The Warrior's Shadow. If you look from a distance, will you see his face in the shadow? His shoulders strong, having carried the weight of battle. If you look closer, will you see his face clearer? Will you look into his eyes to know his heart better? Or will you be afraid to see the burden placed on him? Will you only see his anger when the burden he carries becomes too heavy? Or will you look deeper and understand his sacrifices made in war? Will you look deeper, his sacrifices made in war? Will you look beyond the shadow to seek him so that he may share his story and share with you his dreams?